Clutter is a term that Wiliam Zinsser uses in this wonderful book called On Writing Well. If you're looking for books to read on it, on writing, focus on 2 chapters in particular. You don't have to read the whole book. It's often geared towards magazine writers. Simplicity and clutter. Those are the 2 best chapters in this book, in my estimation. And in one of them, he defines clutter. Mr. Holt.
Clutter is the disease of American writing. We are a society strangling in unnecessary words, circular constructions, pompous frills, and meaningless jargon. But the secret of good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. Every word that serves no function, every long word that could be a short word, every adverb that carries the same meaning that's already in the verb, every passive construction that leaves the reader unsure of who is doing what. These are the 1,001 adulterants that weaken the strength of a sentence. And they usually occur, ironically, in proportion to education and rank.
Yeah, so we could chart this. If you just have a BA, you might have a certain amount of clutter. If you have an MA, you have more clutter. If you have JD, you have more clutter. If you have a PhD, out of this world in terms of clutter. And the reason is we often think big words, complex sentences equals intelligence. And what we have to learn is often it's the opposite. So someone like John Roberts was a really great advocate because he could distill the case down to its essential. He could get rid of all that clutter. It's very similar to what we're talking about, getting rid of all the facts that aren't truths. So let's think about this through a kind of interesting way, which is Pablo Picasso's wonderful painting. You want to say this, Ms. Rydell?
Les Demoiselles d'Avignon.
Yeah, which in English?
The Young Ladies of Avignon.
So he actually started by calling it this.
Le Bordel d'Avignon.
Which is?
The Brothel of Avignon.
Yeah, and so people weren't really too happy about that. And actually, I think he wanted just to call it My Brothel. But in a sort of force of focus moment, he thought, or at least he was cautioned to, Young Ladies of Avignon. So we're going to look at this painting, and what I want us to look at in particular is the difference between an earlier draft and the final version. We're going to notice how a lot of the effect was created by not adding things but removing. So in the first one, we have 5 figures. How many people in the second one we have 5 figures. How many in the first?
It looks like 7.
Yeah, and I'm going to call your attention to number 5 and number 7. So those are dudes. They're not in the next painting. What's the effect of taking out the dudes?
You remove clutter?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's the force of focus, right? We could say, I'll start it out for you in terms of the equation, men equal clutter. You and Pablo Picasso think the same way. No, but it's serious in the sense of, in that first painting, notice where number 5 is. He's the center of that painting. Your attention is drawn to him. With the second painting, it's all about the women. The effect is one that it changes how we react just by removing people. So men equal clutter. That's really good. And what we're going to do is actually give you sort of an idea of how to do this with your writing, but just give us some principles. Mr. Jordan, in the book we talked about with the Malpractice, where the guy rewrote the Malpractice brief, really wonderful book, and he starts out with this epigraph.
Having something to say and say it as clearly as possible. That is the only secret of style.
And it's similar to what Zadie Smith, who's the author of White Teeth and On Beauty and NW, says about writing, which is this.
When an adult, try to read your own work as a stranger would. Read it, or even better, as an enemy would.
Well, why? Why do you want to read it as an enemy would?
Because then you'll take the most critical attitude you could towards it.
Exactly. Here's the danger with writing. You fall in love with your own words. You give it to an enemy, they don't love your words. They're going to get rid of them. David Foster Wallace. Formal writing does not mean gratuitously fancy writing. It means clean, clear, maximally considerate writing. And just look at that rule of 3. You can think about it in the business context. Mr. Jordan, read from Jim Collins. So he has this book, Good to Great, Built to Last, and he writes this in a really cool column in the USA Today.
A great piece of art is composed not just of what is in the final piece, but equally important what is not. It is a discipline to discard what does not fit, to cut out what might have already cost days or even years of effort, that distinguishes the truly exceptional artist and marks the ideal piece of work, be it a symphony, a novel, a painting, a company, or most important of all, a life.
Now let's modify it to the writing that you actually do.
A great piece of legal writing is composed not just of what is in the final piece, but equally important what is not. It is a discipline to discard what does not fit, to cut out what might already have cost days or even years of effort, that distinguishes a truly exceptional lawyer and marks an ideal piece of work, be it a brief, a motion, a T visa, a client pitch, or most important of all, a life.
And again, the need to know principle. What do you need to include in this? The really good advocates are the ones that leave the junk out. And so it's not just enough to say, look, cut out the clutter. I actually want to give you a way to cut out at least a particular kind of clutter. And it's a clutter called zombie now.